to be recording this. It'll stay on. So if you have to leave and come back, it'll be on Facebook that you can come back later to see it. But we also will put it on our YouTube page as well. So, we have somebody in the background that's going to be putting in a link to easily buy both Dean's book and Rob's book. So there you go. So with
Thanks,
that,
Julie.
I'm going to start the evening. Let me introduce. So Dean, you're going to introduce Rob, or am I introducing both of you guys? I can't.
You're going to introduce us both. I want to hear what you have to say.
I've got the floor now. And then I'll throw it. I know we talked about that, but sometimes it's live stuff. I forget what we've discussed.
All right.
So let's talk about Rob Bell. Rob is a New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and spiritual teacher. His books include Love Wins, How to Be Here, What We Talk About When We Talk About God, Velvet Elvis, one of my favorite titles, by the way. That's a great title. The Zim Zoom of Love, which he came to Warwick's, and we were just talking in 2014. He was there with his wife for that book. Sex God, Jesus Wants to Save Christmas, Drops Like Stars, and tonight he'll be talking with us about everything is spiritual. He hosts the weekly podcast, The Robcast, which I love that name too, which was named by iTunes as one of the best of 2015. He was profiled in The New Yorker and in Time Magazine as one of 2011's 100 most influential people. Him and his wife, Kristen, have 3 children, and he lives in Los Angeles. And Dean will be interviewing Rob this evening. He is the founder and director of the journalism program at Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego. He's also the founder and host of the annual Writers Symposium by the Sea. And we have worked with Dean numerous times for that. So we appreciate being included in that, Dean, very much. A 40-year veteran journalist, Nelson's byline has appeared in publications such as the New York Times, Boston Globe, USA Today, San Jose Mercury News, San Diego Union Tribune, Minneapolis Star Tribune, San Diego Magazine, Westways Magazine, Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and more. He lives in San Diego with his wife. His book is Talk to Me as well, and we will have that in the chat. So you two gentlemen have a wonderful conversation. I'll see you in about 40 minutes.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
We love your store. We both love your store.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
All right.
Seriously, Rob, Dean Nelson.
this is. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So I hope everybody watching can just kind of feel the love. But Rob, it's so fun to see you, even if you're in Los Angeles and I'm in San Diego. But it's fun to hang out at least.
I feel the same way.
But people aren't interested in how much you and I admire one another. What they're interested in is your new book. So let's talk about that. It struck me that this is a much more personal book than other ones that you've read. Julie just went through this whole list, and I mean, you bring up personal anecdotes and stuff in your other books, but this one, you deal with some personal stuff, and you open up about struggle and things. And I'm just wondering, why? What was driving you to get into, I'm going to actually be super vulnerable right here?
It was the only thing that was interesting. I had all these big ideas about the cosmos and quantum physics and what we're doing here and how it all works. But it was all flat. It was like, God, I couldn't find. And then I remember and I put the book away. It's like, there's some, maybe I'm just done writing books. And then I picked it up and then I put it down. And then one day I was like, my grandma used to keep cash in her bra, which is the opening line of the book.
Which is a compelling opening statement.
We're going to go from there. And all of a sudden I was back on that porch and I'm in high school and I'm filled with all that in between a boy and a man and all that nervous, tenuous, I don't even know what the word is, hesitation. And I experienced with her this wordless grace. It's like when the presence of another lets you know everything's going to be okay, even if it isn't. And suddenly I'm just tears and, oh, that like shaped me like that. And then that took me into the loss of her husband, my dad's dad, and then the loss of her son, which is my dad's brother. Oh, I was born into a drama like we all are. A child's not a blank slate. But, there was like those people who weren't there were like a presence in absence. And it was so, I'm telling you, Dean, it was so much emotion. Like all these big things I talk about for all these years. How did I get here? Like, how did I come to this? Oh, through these things that happened to me. And suddenly, well, then just tell that. Because essentially, we have to open our hearts to each other. We tried cynicism. We tried ironic mustaches and the rolling of the eyes and we tried it, didn't work. And even you think about polarization, specifically political polarization, it's the inability to see yourself in another. And there was something about this, it was like literally like learning, it's the 11th book, it was like learning to write again. Because there was like a line, I felt so much shame. I like type that line and then I was like, that's not a Rob Bell sentence. Doesn't
Exactly.
doesn't have any pyrotechnics, doesn't have
Right.
any, but that's what happened. And it was like,
Yeah.
just trust it. Just tell them what it was like. Tell what you learned. Then tell the next thing. Like, just, so the mantra was just what opens the heart. What opens,
Yeah.
and in some ways, you know, that this tradition I come from so valued the intellect, but it was like, you just get stuck in your head. So it felt like a giant life. It was like a life-changing experience. Like, felt like the head was sinking into the heart and the heart was going, you report to me.
Well,
Yeah.
it was so interesting because you do have these big ideas. You've got huge ideas in this book, but you keep toggling
Yes.
between the big ideas and the cash in the bra. And
Yes.
you just keep toggling between those two things, which I so love about your style. I mean, you sort of do this kind of style in your other books too, where it almost feels like stream of consciousness for a while, where it's like we're watching Rob pick up this thread and look at it, and then he picks up this thread and looks at it, and you're wondering as the reader, are these things related? And then by the end of a chapter or two, you realize he's woven this beautiful fabric here. And I don't know anybody else's style who works as well as you. So here's my question, just writer to writer now.
Oh, see, this is stuff I love. I love the inside baseball on the craft.
Exactly. So is this a conscious thing on your part, or is this just the way your brain works and you just kind of roll with it?
Yeah, well, one answer would be I can give you a constellation of images.
Constellation's a good word for the way you write.
3, 4, 5, and and then something begins to happen in the space between them. So like there's like a section where I talk about this priest in Ireland, a boxing club I went to, Amazon book reviews, and simultaneous duality within subatomic particles. So that section is like a whole series of stories, and it's almost like they're duct taped together. That's intentional because that's how memory works. So I wanted the book to feel like your life feel as you look back on that period, and those were the things that were sort of buzzing around that time period, and you know something happened there in among those things. But if I draw it too tightly, you lose all of how we're actually transformed.
I love it because I'm reading your book, Everything is Spiritual, and I'm reading about the boxing thing, and I'm reading about the Irish priest, and I've got a couple of things going on in my head. One is, how do these things have anything to do with one another?
Right.
But here's the other thing is, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to keep going rather than think I am just talking to a guy with ADD who just needed to just dump this out.
No.
I'm going to trust you that this is all going to make sense. And here's the thing, it did. It totally made sense.
Well, and here's the thing. Oh, see, first off, that makes my day. The book, it's a feeling. So there's like a feeling a millimeter below the surface. Because in some ways the book is a book of awkward, embarrassing stories where things don't quite line up, and yet I wanted you to have an experience of a feeling of the wobbly frailty of life, and yet some sort of propulsive something just below the surface that keeps inviting you to new creation. So
Well,
I had to keep coming back structurally. There's a feeling that I'm imprinting on this, that I'm trying to communicate. That's not just a conceptual framework. It's a feeling.
right. And so the way you get that across is it makes me think when I read this book in particular, it makes me think, oh, that thing that happened when I was a kid.
There you go.
Oh, this when my parents just died. This all of these things that just seem like these random events in my life. I'm reading your book and seeing the way you're pulling all of these threads together. I'm saying, oh, you know what? They're all part of it. It's all part of the deal. That's what I get when I read your book.
And that's as much a conceptual affirmation as it is something happening at like a heart level.
Yeah. So let me ask you about influence here. Years and years ago, I read, I know you and I both adore the work of Richard Rohr. And I read a book of his called Everything Belongs.
Yeah.
And this is the Rob Bell version of Everything Belongs, wouldn't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I'd say. Yeah, of course, yes.
So was that in your head while you were writing this? Or do you just think, yeah, that there was some imprint somewhere in there?
I remember reading that book years ago and going, yeah. My first Everything is Spiritual tour was 2006, and it was probably early 2000s where the split between some kind of space and other kind of space, maybe mid 90s, where it didn't work to split up creation into what you've written about, sacred and the profane, or it was all holy. There's burning bushes everywhere. And then once you begin to see creation in all space differently, then the dualities of good, bad, win, lose, success, failure, you start to realize something's happening in all of them. When I look back, it was the failures where I learned the most. So in some ways, the book is an invitation to a non-dual awareness, that all these different things that you're constantly putting in these different columns, there's something happening in all of it.
They are. And so for you then to bring in quantum theory. So we're going to get to quantum theory here in just a second, but I got to back up just a little bit. Your description of how you crashed, and this is what I mean about you being so vulnerable in here. I was just stunned. I mean, I knew some of this already because you and I are friends, but when you describe in your book for the whole world to see that you crashed and your wife found you on the floor of your house and took you to a therapist, and that led to you going to a spiritual director. And I'm just thinking, was that really hard for you to kind of admit to the world? Because here's this, I think the world has this image of you as this confident, smart, funny guy. And here's this whole section that says, and I was so incredibly weak that I was on the floor in the fetal position. Was that hard to finally put language on?
No, not at all.
Why not? I would think that'd be terrifying.
Because of how many people I've told that story to, and I've watched them go, I can see it in their eyes. Oh my God, I'm not alone. Somebody else knows. And how many people I've gotten to interact with who are running too fast, too long, too hard. And I can pick up the burnout on them, and they knew that about me and came to me. So I've told that story 1,000 times because people needed to hear it and know that this modern machine makes you insane because it only knows up and to the right. Expand more, work harder. And then there's that whole world of guilt of you just don't want it bad enough. You just need to work hard. You just need to push yourself. You just need to, while you're resting, someone else's, all that nonsense that makes people insane. So yeah, no, not at all.
So all you did, because you already knew the impact then of that story, all you did was just increase maybe the number of people that that you're telling it to.
And it's such a great question, because here's what would happen over the years. I'd be speaking somewhere, and it was the stories about things not going well that were always the stories that lit the place up. And I noticed
Funny how that works.
that nobody was interested in how that people were just always interested in the I could do a whole nother book of things going wrong. And I noticed that when I would meet people I really admired, them telling me how awesome it was for them wasn't that interesting. I mean, whenever they would tell me how it didn't work, or they were still trying to figure out, or that was always the weirdly comforting
Yeah.
thing. I mean, there's a musician I grew up like admiring. I can't even tell you how. When I was in my early 20s, I got a haircut like his. That level of admiring. And years later, I got to meet him. And Kristen and I were at his house in his kitchen with him. And he told about having problems with their home computer. And the computer wasn't working, it was crashing. And I'm telling you, that's, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
That's what he gets mad at, because his home computer isn't working.
Yeah.
The first time it even happens to him. But that's what I'm telling you. Like, I just had, I'm sure you had this, all the people you gotten to interview, it was that was the stuff that helped you.
Right. But I totally agree. But to articulate the way you did, where you just had to come to terms with, you had to give up control.
Yes.
You had to give up your image. You had to give up your purpose in life at that time was solving problems, solving people's problems. You were the guy.
Oh.
And now
so true.
And now you're saying in this book, you're saying, and all that had to burn away.
Yes.
And that's where the good stuff started.
Yes.
And I
Right.
was just blown away by how vulnerable you were.
No, you're completely right. When there's that line about success broke my heart, a whole world of assumptions just got smashed to pieces. By the way, the therapist we went to that night, last 2 weeks ago, I haven't seen him in a decade. We did a Zoom call with him. He's now a Buddhist teacher. He's like a Roshi. And Kristen and I and our older son Trace, we did like a Zoom call with him and talked about that time. And it was so powerful to like reconnect with him.
If anybody would understand a concept like everything is spiritual and everything belongs, it would be a Buddhist Roshi.
Yeah. And I was,
Right?
I mean, the adrenaline, the turbocharged air I was living in with this thing we'd started, and it's exploding, and everywhere I turn there are people who want something in it, and I'm just going and going and going and going, because in the world I came from, the worst thing would be if somebody thought you were lazy.
Yeah. Or weak.
Or weak, or you couldn't handle it, or you weren't carrying your weight. And just to come to the end of that whole thing was like, it was like I can just set this down. Yeah.
Well, it was so funny because on the one hand, you come to this conclusion intellectually that says, but it's not supposed to be this way, where I'm weak, I'm spent, I need to go see a professional. It's not supposed to be this way. But then you kind of follow it up with, yeah, it is. It is, because that's where stuff begins.
Yes,
right?
You would love this. That week, I had a meeting with the main pastors who ran the church with me, and I was like, "Hey, I'm like cooked. Like I'm just now learning about burnout. I'm learning about how far I've pushed myself. This whole new world of understanding has opened up, but I'm like depleted. I went to a doctor who was like, "Yeah, your like body is depleted." and I just pour out my heart to them, and there's a pause. You would love this. And the one says, so so you're going to be preaching this weekend, right? Huh?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. They really heard you, didn't
I
they,
just
Rob?
ripped open the rib cage and just laid out. I have been reaching down deep and like scraping the bottom of the barrel for years now to like push through again. And then there's like a pause, and it was like, we got a thing to run here. So
Yeah.
what do you like?
Yeah. Are you in or are you out?
Oh, it was
Unreal.
yeah.
Okay. So what does any of this have to do with physics?
Well, I mean, when I stumbled into quantum physics, and everything's made of atoms and atoms made of particles, and an atom is essentially a relationship of energy. It's a cloud of possibilities. And the chair that you're sitting on, and the computer that I'm holding, and the wall behind you, and the hedge behind me, all this inanimate matter is actually ultimately these clouds of possibilities and relationships of energy. The whole thing is way more dynamic. I mean, that was like, I knew it. I knew the whole thing is more alive.
Yeah.
As
There's a
opposed
story
to
behind the story. Right.
A static world where there are these objects, dead objects in space. From a young age, I had just intuitively like, no, the whole thing it's pulsing, it's vibrating, it's plugged into something. And I mean, physics is different than interior experiences of transcendence. They exist in different dimensions of the human experience, but the poetry of it, the poetry of the physics resonated at some. I knew it. You talk to that person and you just feel like the life got sucked out of you. Who knows what kind of exchange was going on? I just always knew there was more going on than this sort of flat, reductionist, materialist, all we are is cells and synapses. It always just felt so boring and not what this experience felt like.
Yeah, and that comes across that in, I think, some really, really exciting ways in your book, where that's sort of the drumbeat underneath it. There's always more going on.
Yes.
There's always more going on. That, I just feel that throughout this. So even when it comes to, you do sort of a quantum explanation of community, that which I just thought was brilliant, by the way. You apply the theory of entanglement to community. So can you give us the
which is always dangerous. Always a scientist somewhere going, oh, good God, don't take
exactly
that.
There's a lot of eye rolling.
But I always just smile and go, hey, it's true there, and I can go with the poetry of it. Two atoms are bonded and they part ways, and they remain aware of what the other one's doing without any signal or communication between them. So there's some sort of interconnectedness of everything. Just helps me understand. In the book I talk about, there's tons of people without homes on the streets around my neighborhood here, and we know that all of this is connected to all of this. We know. You even have this fascinating data now about first world countries, and at the countries where there's a widening gap between rich and poor, the life expectancy is lower for everybody, including the rich. When you now have all these fascinating new ways of extracting data that are like, no, everything is actually connected to everything else. And if these people are suffering, it affects everybody at every level. And obviously now with race and with health, that's just their problem. No, nothing is just their problem. If it's their problem, it's our problem. All divisions take part within wholes.
Right, and that's the beauty of applying entanglement to human relations and societies and all that. You're essentially saying you cannot silo yourself, either as an individual or as a nation or whatever. That the entanglement piece is just as true among humans as it is among atoms. Because, as you point out, we're made up of atoms.
Yes, and the reason why this, I mean, it's just at like a personal relational level, how many people are having interactions and they were taught a view of human beings as these sort of enclosed autonomous beings. You think about workplaces where it was like, oh, that's just so and so who works two desks down. You're in the same space with somebody 8 hours a day. Who knows what kind of exchanges are taking place? Or you think about in business, how many interactions are like, no, we just did the deal and got out of there. No, there were histories and dramas and feelings and personalities. There was 1,000 things going on in that exchange. And when you reduce the human experience to tell cells, synapses, transactions, just for so many people all along, they were always picking up that there was way more happening in the space between them and other people. No wonder you're a relationship of energy. They're a relationship of energy. No wonder your mother-in-law makes you mental. Like she dragged 79 years of bitterness into that phone call. Do you know what I mean? No wonder it took you 2 days to detox.
Yeah.
At some level, for a lot of people, hopefully it's like, yeah, that's why you feel that way, or why you took a while to flush that out of the system. It's completely normal, of course. Take it easy on yourself.
So another dimension of quantum. I got to stick with this quantum thing.
Isn't it fun?
I found it so fascinating. Yeah. So another dimension of this is in how if you observe certain things, then that changes the behavior or the nature or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we get that if you've studied physics, but then you do that with how we bear one another's pain. So
how we witness.
Exactly.
Right.
So here's the line. By witnessing the pain of others, you affect the experience, just like in the entanglement of physics. How in the world is that true?
I know. See, we just go for it. We just go for it.
But you got to explain that to me. How is just bearing, by witnessing the pain of others, how does that affect the experience?
Okay, so let's back up. For so many people in the modern world, there is subject object. There is you, and then you observe something happening, and the thing happens whether or not you're watching it, because there's a line between you watching the thing.
Yeah.
Then quantum physics come along the last 100 years, and these physicists say, actually, an atom leaves one place and travels to another, a subatomic particle. It travels every possible route. It's essentially a cloud of possibilities. It only reveals which route it took when you observe it. So your observation of the atom affects what the atom does. So at a quantum level, there is no line. So, I mean, let's just pause for a minute, because was it Niels Bohr or was it Planck who said, if you study quantum physics and you're not outraged, you're not studying quantum physics? Because Isaac Newton came along, wrote this book called Principia, gave us mechanical physics, objects in motion stay in motion. The universe functions according to predictable laws. That's how you build a car, an airplane, throw a ball. But then quantum physicists went down farther into the nature of being, were like, actually, the way that things work at a subatomic level follows no predictable laws. It's the subatomic realm is a completely different, the rules don't make any sense like we think of it. So that, to me right there, I have to just pause and say, for every person who's ever been like, I think the whole thing is weirder than we were first taught. Yes, that's a scientific fact. That's not woo-woo. That's like Princeton, Harvard, Einstein.
Right.
So I think that's important.
Yeah.
Point Loma. That's like really important to establish. So if there is no line between the one observing the thing happening, then the universe is a participatory experience. So the person who's like, I'm just going to sit this one out, no one is sitting it out. The act of observing affects the outcome. So then that's where I just went to, how many people, how much rage, anger, betrayal, alienation, that led to all sorts of violence in the world came because somebody was in pain and nobody witnessed to it. And I'm sure you've been through this. You're going through a difficult time and you realize you're calling your friends, trying to find and every friend wants to help fix it. You're like, that's not helpful. The first friend who just goes, God, that must be really tough. And you
Yeah.
realize, oh my word, all I was looking for was somebody, I didn't need anybody to
Yeah.
fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, Kristen, how often just goes, wow, that must be really difficult. Oh, thank you. The
Yeah.
witness to the thing affected oh, good, someone sees.
Did you ever see the movie Lars and the Real Girl?
You know what? Kristen just watched it. And I
Okay.
like the Gosling, so I'll have to
Yeah.
watch it.
So there's a scene in there. I won't spoil it for you, but there's a scene in there that all of this just reminded me of that scene where he goes through a loss. The Ryan Gosling character goes through a loss. And the people in his community, these old ladies in his community, just come over to his house. He opens the
Yeah.
door. They just come in. They sit down and they just start knitting.
Yeah.
And he says, "What are you guys doing?" He says, "Well, you're hurting. We knit." And that, when you described that sort of bearing witness to someone else's pain, actually affects the experience of the pain. That scene from the movie. If you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking
I'll
about.
know what you're talking about. You know what? You actually just helped me understand something, because so much of this happened when I became a pastor at 25. What do you know when you're 25? I mean, I was in so far over my head. And suddenly I'm doing funerals and going to the hospital. It actually helped. This is like what was writing the book. It really helped me understand. At a young age, I was in so far over my head that I would be in these situations where there's nothing to say. So, but I'm the pastor and I put on my suit and I'm in the funeral home and I can't explain why your brother got hit by a car. All I can do is sit with you in your shock, anger, rage, loss. So at some point, even though my work has been so much about words, early on, I was confronted with the impotence of my words and how many times I would just be present, witnessing to the person's pain. And then years later, that was what they said helped.
Yeah.
So I think I was released from the idea that the highest thing you can do is say clever things.
Yeah.
Then I went on to try to say things for years. But I think that's where that all comes from is, oh, most of us just want somebody to see it.
Yeah. And that affects the experience.
It affects the experience.
That's the quantum of interpersonal relationships. So beautiful. So I want to talk about the word soul. You bring up soul, S-O-U-L.
Yes.
You bring up soul in your book, and here's what you say about it. You say you need mind to navigate the path. You need soul to know whether this is even the right path. Soul is tuned in to whether or not the ladder is leaning against the right building. What do you mean by soul? What is that?
The timeless essence that is uniquely you and yet not bound to the surface identity markers of height, weight, city you were born in, academic achievement. I do these sessions with people. You should sit in sometime. They're so much fun, where people from all over the world on Zoom. I used to do them live, now I'm doing Zoom. People are working on something, they come to me how they're stuck. So they tell me their name, where they're from, this is what I'm working on, here's how I'm stuck. And then we watch them get unstuck. So artists, activists, heart surgeons, therapists, and I never know anything about them because I need to just be fully present and see what happens. But what's fascinating is how many people, all we have to do is help the mind chatter subside. Because they've got somebody on their shoulder telling them this is how long the book is supposed to be. They've got an agent, they've got a relative, they've got colleagues saying this is how you run that whatever practice. And if we can just create a space where the chatter in the mind quiets down and listen. Sometimes I'll even ask them, what's on top of your heart?
What does
There's
that
a
mean?
Well, it's literally like an image I'll give people. What's
Yeah.
what's the thing on top of your heart, which just helps people sink down in how often people identify a knowing. Oh, yeah, I got it. That there's some, let's call it soul. Sometimes it's called heart. There's
Mhm.
some you that knows, and how. And then I'll often ask people, have you ever been in some situation where everything around you was telling you this, but something within you was like, that's not going to work. But the pressure around you, you went with it. And then later it turns out it wasn't the thing. And then you're like, I knew it the whole time. Yeah, there's something within you that knows at some the Christ in you, you in the Christ, intuition, whatever you want to call it. And I find this fascinating. That's what happened to me because I'm in this church that I'd started and it's massive and there's all these people. And yet I know this isn't what I'm here to do, run a big institution. That's how I encountered soul, is there was something within me going, this isn't the thing you're here to do. Even though
Okay.
everybody around you is telling you this is the thing you're here to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just love these lines. Soul doesn't care what it is or what it should be called. Soul just wants to enter into it and feel
Yeah.
it and absorb it and experience. Soul wants to participate.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, when I read
Yes.
that, my soul just said yes to that. Well, it said yes to so many things in this book, but it really resonated with that. So let me ask you about assumptions that we live with, and because you had to get past some of the assumptions you were living with, and some that we aren't even aware of. But I love this line in your book that says, "The story your tribe told you isn't big enough." So that just sounds so
Yeah.
disloyal on the one hand, because
Yeah.
your tribe is your family, your tribe,
Yeah.
or maybe it's your community, or maybe it's your faith tradition or whatever. And you're saying, "No, at some point you outgrow that." Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, maybe. What's fascinating, anywhere I go in the world over the past 5 years, this question comes up in every single group anywhere that I am. They came up through a world that fed them and clothed them and educated them and loved them and supported them. And in some way they kept going. And
Beyond.
beyond some experience of beyond whatever those boundaries were. And once you see, you can't unsee. Once you taste, you can't untaste. Once it's out of the box, you can't jam it back in. And so these feelings of disorientation, disloyalty, and the tribe has its own codes and systems for reining you back in, but you cannot violate your experience. I think it's fascinating in the New Testament, one of the dominant questions is, who is my family?
Mm-hmm.
Expanded consciousness always will call into questions earlier primal bonds and networks. Is you've seen and now you can't unsee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got this sense of family getting redefined. You've got Jesus on the cross saying, "Woman, there's your son. Son, there's your mother." Those two were not related, and Jesus just redefined family. In
Absolutely. Because whenever consciousness expands into greater complexity, greater inclusion, and greater freedom. So all new stages of maturity, wholeness, and higher consciousness will always include a number of things that were previously excluded, freedom from things that previously weren't available. And yes, it always has. And the tribe, the institution, will not tell you, hey, you might outgrow this, because it has a vested interest. Institutions always bend towards their own self-preservation. So what's shocking for so many people, especially in regards to spirituality, is they were not taught this is how it works, because the system they came from is not going to undermine itself.
which brings me to a moment when you and I were driving in San Diego, that you you were at our writers symposium. You and I are driving in my car on Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, and you're telling me about this book that's about to come out called Love Wins.
Oh, no way. Did I was with you right before Love Wins came out?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
right
that's
before.
fantastic.
Yeah. So you're telling me about this book, and then you say, and the people around me are saying, when this book comes out, your life is going to change.
Wow.
So you told me that
Did I really?
just a month or two before the book came out, and your life really did change. So I think that's sort of an illustration of the point you were just making about you've got this system that had you kind of defined,
Yeah.
and then this book comes out and they don't know what to do because now you can't be defined anymore.
That had started happening a decade before that book came out, so I was sort of used to that. But yeah, you just keep following it. You just keep following it where it leads. Yeah, Kristen and I would have talks about this way back in our 20s. Like, oh, if you follow this and take it seriously, who knows where you'll end up?
Right.
But
Right.
if you're following the life and the integrity and soul, you'll be more alive than ever. So there must be some different way to think about that than external, superficial markers of
Right.
success or achievement. If people use the word career, I just laugh out loud. Like, it's never a career.
Yeah. All right. So I got to be conscious of time here. So let me ask you this about, and bring it into sort of current events. So you've got a book called Everything is Spiritual. And I'm looking at the things that are going on in our world.
Yeah.
With this pandemic.
Yeah.
With protests.
Yeah.
With redefining authority and our relationship to authority. With our relationship to facts, to information. I'm thinking about wildfires and hurricanes and all of that. I would love to know how you think about, is everything really spiritual when it just looks like the whole thing is falling apart?
Yeah. Great question. And I would say now more than ever, because the looting came 8 houses from us. Like the stores right there, 8 houses down, got wrecked. They're all boarded up right now. So, I mean, my neighborhood, and then the forest fires. Let's throw the forest fires into there.
Exactly.
Um,
Probably an earthquake on its way.
So what people will say is that people use, it feels like apocalyptic right now, but by apocalyptic people mean an ending. But apocalypse is a Greek word that means a revealing or a disclosure.
Oh, I
so
love
a
it.
true apocalypse is not an ending, it is a revealing of what is. So we have a political party in our country that is against more people voting, because when more people vote, they lose. So they literally, voter suppression is what they have been doing, and now they're just being honest about it. So that's been happening. We're never going to have a better system unless it all gets revealed and disclosed. We have wounds, you could say, going back to the founding of this country in slavery, but go even before that, that if we don't go all the way to the heart of the wound, it will just continue to be in our midst. This economy is literally putting more and more money in the hands of a few people, while more and more people have less. Like, this economy turns out to be, this arrangement, a trajectory. It has an arc to it. It goes in it doesn't trickle down. We now know that for sure.
No, it just goes.
So,
yeah.
US spends twice as much on healthcare as any other developed country, and we have no unified universal healthcare system. Every other first world country does this. So we're told this is impossible and freakish, even though every other first world country does this. So, Dean, I read these moments as the great unmasking. And it's ugly and painful, and feels like solid ground is gone, but you have to have the full disclosure so you can ever create a new thing. It's like you got to turn all the knobs up and you got to go the whole way. And
So,
even social media and the fact that the algorithms bend towards the outrageous. If you simply locked in on the fact that all the social media platforms, they go where the heat is, and the heat is ridiculous and outrage, you could become president just on those algorithms alone with no competence or moral center. Like, these machines we've made can be bent in some really destructive ways. So
how does this connect with everything as spiritual?
spirit lurks in all of it. Like, you think about the Genesis poem the Bible begins with. It's darkness, void, the unknown. The Hebrew word is tohu vavohu. It's chaos. And spirit is hovering over those waters and then enters into those waters. And out of that, oh, the poetry's so beautiful, comes all this new diversity and design and order and aesthetics. So the great art in the spiritual life is at the moment when it all seems like it's most falling apart, is when you open your eyes and pay even greater attention, because that's where the new creation is lurking. So if you and I go to, let's pick an idea. Let's go to the website of a cancer foundation and we go to the about, why does this foundation exist? The person will say, I lost my fill in the blank loved one. And when they died, I started this foundation. Like, think it, that's how it works.
So are you
Something
saying,
was hovering in the mess, the chaos, the pain, the loss.
are you saying that we're on the verge of something pretty awesome?
Well, I look at my kids who cannot fathom a world in which caring for the environment isn't a first priority. So there even is a
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
My 11-year-old daughter, Violet, recycling. The other day she told me she's a strong, independent woman. Like, the idea that she wouldn't have every single option that a man has. It's not even like a cause to her. It's like gravity. It's like obvious. So I look at my kids, and a representative democracy in which people can receive money from corporations is not a representative democracy. So, like, I just look at my kids, and this world, the way it's arranged, is utterly incomprehensible to them.
That actually gives you hope, doesn't it?
So, yeah, my answer would be, there are a number of things where we are already looking at it going, this is completely barbaric and insane. They are like, you what? What? Yeah, but man, you have to have the great unmasking, the upheaval. It all has to be dragged out into the light, which is
Okay.
just brutal. And yet, without it, the thing just goes on as it is. Yeah,
Well,
so Kristen and I call it apocalyptic hope. It's hope,
I like it.
but it's honest about how you're going to get there.
Okay. I love it. Rob, I love hanging out with you. Hope we get to do it
Oh,
in person
man.
again.
It's seriously, it's like an honor. I love it. I'm so honored you read the book, let
Oh my
alone,
gosh. Loved your book.
oh, good.
So
That was a fantastic conversation. I mean, I was in the background listening. I'm nodding. I'm watching the comments come in. It was just like, it was fantastic.
Good.
And
Oh,
then I'm
that's
watching
right.
it get,
People are watching this.
yeah.
I seriously was talking to Dean. All of a sudden, I was like,
Yeah.
wait, there are people
Yeah.
watching.
There
Hi,
are people
people.
watching.
Hi,
people.
everybody. It got dark.
I
in
know.
my
I was going
front
to say
yard.
that we were watching it get darker and darker on you, Rob.
yeah, it looks
thanks.
like Rob's on his way to the moon or something.
Exactly. So we have lots of love came through, lots of great comments. I'm going to just get to a few questions. Sorry, everybody, we don't quite have time to get to everything, but some of them came in early. And so Erin had a question. She said, hi, Rob. What does it look like for you on a day-to-day basis to, quote, seek first the kingdom of God?
I walk the dog.
Oh, I love that answer. Oh my
So,
gosh, I love that.
to me, this is not a lofty, ephemeral, otherworldly thing. It is I have these people I love, this work I'm here to do. I walk the dog. When I walk the dog, there's this mantra I say to myself, everything you will need for the day, you will have when you need it. We're good, especially this past 6 months with some of that claustrophobia with limited options. And then for me, it's not an abstract idea. It's how do I love the people I'm with? How am I present to them? And then it's always worked for me. I got some work to do. So there's always the next thing that I'm making. So I throw myself into it. That's my answer to the problems of the world. I'm gonna plow my field.
Exactly. And we
Keep
all
it really, really simple.
we all need to do that, right? We all
Yeah.
just did that.
Yeah, I keep it really. And what's interesting when I talk to people is when you can get away from the chatter and all the stuff in their head about how they're supposed to do it. Most people with just a few moments of deep breath and silence can find what their contribution is. Yeah. Yeah.
And your comment about the social media and that is just so spot on as far as just like these machines, and that if we all just unplugged a little bit, we would.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't go on social media, by the way.
Yeah.
That's how I find the kingdom of God. I don't
Exactly.
go on comment sections. I don't do any of that stuff.
But we have to tonight.
No,
Unless I'm
you
with
have
you,
to.
Julie.
I
You
have
have
to
to,
tonight.
Unless I'm with you, Julie.
I'm the one jumping in there, but we've got some great people that are viewing, so we want to get to their questions. So Rachel had a question. She has a copy of, I think, an older book, and I think I'm going to mess up the name of this. Is Millionaire? How?
Oh yeah, I wrote a novel called Millones Cojones about a B-grade motivational speaker who has a emotional breakdown.
Anyways, I don't know if it's available. She was wondering if there were any signed copies anywhere, but I don't know.
There's copies at my site.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, there's copies at my site.
Her question is, are there any parallels to that and Everything is Spiritual? That book and Everything is Spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, I mean, obviously I sort of had a meltdown and the main character has a meltdown. So the whole novel came about because of this. When I had sort of a burnout, something happened to me so surreal. I was like, I'm going to make a whole novel out of that and make up a fictional character. So they speak to each other. Yes.
Yeah.
But I would not, as Dean would say, I'm not going to connect any of the lines too directly.
Yeah, there you go.
That is for the reader to enjoy.
Exactly. I like that. And sometimes it's really interesting because you can lay it out there and they might connect different lines than maybe even you even intend.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm not gonna mess up their interpretation.
Yeah, because that's the thing with the focus pulling on what they're gonna do there. And she had a really fun question though, is why did you stop wearing those glasses you did in the Numa series?
Does she want to know the truth?
Probably.
Because I moved to California and then my life was better and I noticed that I didn't need glasses anymore and I was losing my hair and I moved to California and my hair grew back.
Wow.
How's that, Dean?
That's amazing.
I don't even think I've ever said that publicly.
That is, oh my gosh.
No, because you think that maybe your life is, maybe you're carrying around stresses you don't know, maybe it's time for a move, and then you move and literally your body response.
Isn't it amazing?
I didn't need. Oh, and then I went to an eye doctor and I was like, I've needed glasses and now I don't need them. And I was like, I don't get it. And this is what happened. The doctor tests me and then she says, well, you have like a stigma. So the one eye was like slightly off from the other one. She said, the only way somebody heals from that is if they were to stare off into the middle distance for hours at a time. And I was like, oh my God, surfing.
I'm on it.
She said, if somebody were to like stare off in the middle distance a couple hours each day, that actually, you could work that out. So I rest my case. That's why I don't wear glasses.
Surfing.
Although just lately I had trouble reading stuff that was really fine print. So who knows, the glasses might come back. But yeah, isn't that strange?
I love it. Oh, we'll get to a couple more here, and then we'll let you go into the night.
This is fun. This is fun.
Nicole has a long comments. You can maybe go look at those a little bit later because there's lots of great comments that are going in. But she has a random fun question. What is your favorite thing to do in your downtime? In quotes.
I don't know what downtime is, but I wake up in the morning and I go surfing, and then everything's fine. Then the world's fine, and then we can get about the day. It's like that's moving meditation. Everything then makes sense, and we can go about our day.
Yep, I love that.
Other
And
than that, in the kitchen, probably right now when I'm done here, in the kitchen, there's some rap playing on the stereo. My kids are in there. Kristen's in there. Somebody's dancing. Somebody's showing a TikTok video. Somebody is making us laugh. We're eating various things, never the same thing together. And it's just the best hang ever. That's what it's been like. That's the highlight for me of life.
Yeah.
my dolphin pod, as we call ourselves.
It is. It's just living the simple, just enjoying those simple moments.
Absolutely.
Together. It's just so important. Dean, you're getting lots of love for all your questions. Were wonderful. And
seriously,
it was
send that love to Dean.
Yep, Dean's got some love too here.
I
love it. Chip has a question. Rob, once you've outgrown the mythology of your tribe, where do you head for new community?
Depends on who you are and where you live and what you're interested in and where it's leading you. And I think that you probably create it yourself. I would always just ask the person, what is it you're longing for? Can you do it in your backyard? Is it a meal? Is it people to journey with? Is it you're all reading something and discussing it? Is it so you don't have to wait for somebody somewhere else to create it. You could simply ask, what's the thing that if I stumbled into it, I'd be like, oh, this is awesome. I could have done this. And then you make that. It's like you find everybody else by trusting what's in you. There's got to be somebody else feeling what I'm feeling. Yeah, start it in your living room.
Love it. Well, this was a fantastic evening. Dean, if people want to find out more about you, do you jump into that social media world to let people know what you're thinking?
I am on Twitter occasionally, but only if I say, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Rob Bell on Monday night.
There you go.
So I'm at Dean E. Nelson, but you can go to my website. It's deannelson.net. And you can put all that up on your deal, Julie, if you want. But
Perfect.
Yeah, that's how. It's not like I've got this big calendar that says, hey, where I'm going to be next.
But sometimes people might, well, you're a very thoughtful guy, and people might want to listen to hear, isn't he? I mean, Dean's interviews are sort of the best interviews.
I know.
Well, thanks.
I love it.
I'm feeling the love. So I don't know the answer to your question. Julie.
Okay. Well, just once in a while, you need to go on Twitter more and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah.
And then Rob, what's your website for the? I mean, I think we've got a lot of your fans, but for those of you that might be new fans,
robbell.com.
there you go. And they can probably find everything.
Yep.
Well,
listen to the Robcast. Hey, if you want to listen to Rob turning the tables, where he me. I don't know what episode it is, but it was last year sometime. You can find
Rob Bell talks to Dean Nelson. That was a good one.
Was that on the podcast?
Yeah, on the Robcast.
Yes. There you go.
I don't know how long that was. A year, more than a year ago. I don't remember.
I don't know. I've been too ashamed to come back to your neighborhood.
What does our sense of time is completely. What does March mean? What does any of that?
I don't know.
Thank you, everybody, though.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That
Rob.
was
People out there.
wonderful.
It's just wonderful.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for your time, and your insight is just incredible. I love apocalyptic hope.
Yes.
That is, if anything we take away from this evening, that is especially what we're living in right now. So thank you.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That's wonderful. Much love to everybody. And Dean.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Julie, thank you, Dean. Such an honor for you to. Oh, it's just wonderful. And Julie, thank you.
Thank you. All right,
Thank
we're
you.
going
All the
on to
folks at
Facebook.
Warwick's.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.